Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Layla, and for today's TikTok Tuesday, we're going to be talking about student loans. I'm of course going to get to the TikToks in just a bit, but I do think this topic is a little bit tricky just because I think when it comes to student loans, there's a lot of emotion around it. There's a lot of feelings around student loans. Now, for myself, I graduated in December of 2016 with my master's in biology. Back in 2015, I graduated with my bachelor's in biology, and I had over $49,000 of student loan debt. I had to start paying that back in 2017, and I also had a number of other debts, my car loan, my credit cards, I owed my sister money. I focused on all of that first before moving on to my student loans, and honestly a big part of that reasoning as well was because of the pandemic, and then student loans went into forbearance, 0% interest, so I did not have to make student loan payments, which honestly was a huge thing for me because I was paying thousands in interest on an annual basis on my student loan debt. I had student loans that ranged from like 3.4% up to over 6%. So I was paying basically $5 plus on a daily basis on my student loans, but then once that 0% hit, that was huge, and I decided to start saving that money instead of actually making the payments. I saved it all up. At that point, it was, February, March 2020, and all I had left was $36,000 of student loans. So I was like, okay, I'm going to save $36,000, and then once this forbearance ends, I'm going to drop the whole thing, lump sum payment. And that's exactly what I did. And the reason I chose to save the money instead of pay it down was because it was at 0% interest. And by me having that money saved for the couple of years that it was at 0% interest, I made money off of my debt. Now, I believe there's a TikTok in here where she talks about this, like why she's not paying her student loans. And yeah, you'll see, and I'll talk about like my thoughts on why I did that and kind of talk about it more when we get to that one. There was also the possibility of forgiveness. Biden was saying that if you had grants, then you could get $20,000 forgiven. I was somebody who received grants as a student. Otherwise, it would be $10,000 forgiven. And I thought that was really exciting. Like, if I, let's say I saved up the $36,000 to pay it off and then they forgave $20,000, I would have a huge amount of cash left over, and that would have been pretty life-changing for me, honestly. Maybe not life-changing, but it would have been pretty significant at the time. It was not something I was banking on, though. It's just kind of like we'll see what happens. It also was not something where I was like, I'm going to keep on waiting and not pay my student loans, because I always had the understanding of like, okay, I took out this debt, I am going to pay it back, but obviously if I'm going to be offered $20,000, then of course I will happily have that forgiven from my debt. But as we all know, that did not carry through. Now, I know during that time, a lot of people were very against that because then it would cost taxpayers more and cause all these other issues. I'm not going to get into that too much. I think it would have been helpful for a lot of people. And I know that there's the argument of like, what about all the PPP loans and like the businesses getting things forgiven and these billionaires getting things forgiven. And I do think that is a problem. And then as far as like taxpayer things go, I think that was like that wasn't like the best argument in my opinion, just because, for example, I don't want children, but when I pay taxes, I am paying for public schooling, and like that's part of my taxes, even though I'm not going to have children, and that's not anything that's relevant to me at this point, but I want people to be educated, like obviously that's important. Anyways, I have to pay it. So yeah, some of the arguments around that were invalid. I'm not going to get into great detail with that. But something else I was thinking about recently. So first of all, let me back up here. This week, I'm filming this on May 5th, actually. And honestly, I don't stay too in the loop with student loans anymore just because I don't have student loans anymore. Like I paid them off and I'm like, awesome, and I'll keep up to date with some things. But as of today, you have to start paying back student loans. And from my understanding, if you don't start paying those back, they will be reported to collections, and then they can garnish your wages. So this is pretty significant because all of this was not what it was like before. Something else, though, that I was thinking about recently, when I was a sophomore in college, I worked at the bookstore for a semester. It was a little bit longer than a semester, but it was the main bookstore on campus. I went to Georgia State University, and there was something called student loan refunds. And at the beginning of the semester, before it even started, all these people were coming in like paying with their refunds. Like, oh, I want to use my refund because I think, if I recall correctly, their student ID like had that money on there. It was kind of like a credit card. But if they had any student loan refund, they could pay with that money at the bookstore. So at the time, me being uneducated in finances, I obviously took out student loans every year that I went to school because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to go. But I called the financial aid department because I was working at the bookstore, and all these people were paying with student loan refunds. And I'm like, how are these people getting refunds? So I called, and they said people are getting refunds because they are taking out more loans than they actually have to pay for. So they get a refund of that difference. So let's say their tuition cost $5,000, but they took out a loan of $10,000. Their refund is going to be $5,000. But this isn't an actual refund. This isn't like, hey, here's a free $5K. You still have to pay that back. So they told me that on the phone. I'm like, oh, okay. So I guess it's technically a good thing I don't have a refund. And what's crazy is I don't think people understood that this was not an actual refund. I don't think it should be worded that way. Or if they did understand that, they didn't care, because the bulk of the people paying for things with their refunds, sure, there were some textbooks in there, but a large chunk of it, the bulk of their purchases, clothes, university clothes. They also had like regular books at the bookstore. So, like random fiction books. You could buy just random gadgets. You could buy laptops. You could buy all these different things at the bookstore. It wasn't just books. So for the most part, it was on unnecessary purchases, and people were using their student loan debt to cover this. And that's crazy to me. Anyway, I know I'm talking too much. I did want to bring that up though, because I think that's important. I think we do have a problem with finances in general, especially here in the United States. There's not enough education around it. The system is corrupt. I think there are things that need to be fixed with the education system and the interest that is on these student loans and such, but really this comes down to financial literacy, and this starts with parents. And I hope that moving forward, that this generation of parents can become more educated on these things and are starting to realize like, oh, this is something I didn't know as a child, but I have the agency to learn about this and I can teach my children. And I'm afraid that that's not what's going to happen, but that's where it needs to start. Yes, it needs to be implemented in schools and taught better, and sure, there needs to be a better system around everything. But as you become an adult, you're responsible. If you take out debt, you took it out at the end of the day. And yeah, I'll give my thoughts as we go through these. I'm sorry. This one to me is going to I have just a lot of thoughts on this, and it's tough. It's a tough situation. So, okay, let's get started.
So let me get this straight. They made you go to college, and then they made you take out a loan when you were 18 and didn't know what you were doing. So the amount of nonsense that I'm hearing on this app around the student loan repayment is crazy. And all it boils down to is lack of accountability. My daughter went to college. She went to Clark Atlanta. We didn't qualify for financial aid. And she would call me and say, Mom, my friends are getting credit cards and they're taking out loans. And I told her, because she was only 18, and when you're 18, you don't know anything. That's what you guys are trying to say. And I told her, as her parent, don't you dare take a credit card, and don't you dare take out a loan. And let me tell you why. And we had a whole little conversation about loan repayment and FICO scores. So I don't want to hear that when you were 18, someone forced you to go to college and then made you take out a loan, because a lot of y'all are hundreds of $1,000s in debt, not from a 4-year college stint. It's because you went back to college as an adult when you had, when you knew what you were doing, because apparently when you were 18, no one told you what a loan was, even though you signed for it. Stop. Take accountability. No one cares that you have bills to pay and all these things. If you had a mortgage right now, you couldn't say, I'm not paying it. And then I heard people saying, well, a mortgage and an auto loan is not the same. I do agree that those student loans were predatory, 100%. They were at the campuses throwing Amex cards at these kids. But that doesn't give you an excuse for not paying your bills and not paying your loan back. Loans are not free money. Who did you think was going to pay it in the event you couldn't? Like, I don't understand why there's so much discourse around these loan repayments. You took out the loan and you have to pay it back. And short of all of the little workarounds that you guys are saying, oh, I'm just going to have my job pay me in a check and not direct deposit. Figure it all out, because all I'm saying is when you're looking around for workarounds to not pay your debt, that's speaking to your character. And I'm sure you guys don't care. But the lack of accountability that I talk about on this app is wild. And there is one group of people that are the ones making excuses. I didn't know what I was doing. I was only 18. They tell us that we have to go to college. Who's they? I don't understand. You were 18 and you didn't have a parent that you could ask for, like, hey, mom, hey, dad. So you were just away in college, just taking money and thinking that it was free. Pay back your debt, learn a lesson, and maybe teach your kids not to sign contracts that require you to pay back something. No one's coming to your rescue. The excuses, and especially from now, you're adults now, it sounds pretty lame that you're screaming on TikTok about having to pay back a loan you agreed to pay back. Again, loans are not free money. The fact that you were 18 and you didn't know what you were doing is lame, because you had parents. I would imagine there was some adult in your life that you could have asked for counsel around what a loan is. And then y'all went out and took out another one because a whole group of women, my color, want to take out and be MBAs. They want to talk about how they have an MBA. So you took out another loan. So you got loans and you got degrees in marketing. Were you going to work in marketing? You have like degrees in criminal justice. That was the hot one back in the day. Do you work in criminal justice? So now, because you don't work in the field that you got a degree in, not only are you mad because you don't work in that field, because you only picked that field because that was the hot trending thing, now you're mad because you got to pay the money back. My daughter wanted to be a forensic scientist because of the whole OJ thing and the glove don't fit. She was fascinated by it. And she's like, Mom, I'm going to go to college and be a forensic scientist. I'm like, okay, you go get me the newspaper on Sunday, because that's where the help wanted section was. And you show me all the jobs that are forensic scientists. She got the paper, not one single job. I'm like, pick a different major. Pick a major that you can use in any environment. She took a major in communications. And she's now in real estate, senior level of a survey company, and she uses her communications. So yeah, you were 18, nobody cares. You're not 18 now. Be responsible and don't teach your children to think that loans are free money. Be an example for once and for all. Let me know down in the comments. Does this resonate with anyone, or am I talking crazy? Like, am I like out of my mind thinking that someone would have to be responsible for a contract that they signed? Or should I feel compassionate?
Yeah, I like what this lady is saying. I do agree with a lot of it. Aside from, like, she sounds like a great parent and she educated her child on like what not to do and what to do. And not all of us have that. You know, as somebody who, my dad immigrated here from Iran, from the Middle East, and he is not educated in finances, or at least back when I was 18, 17, when I was signing these loans, that he didn't have that. And we also definitely didn't have money saved up to pay for the cost of school. My dad had a little bit, like a couple thousand in a CD account, which I'm very grateful to him for helping me out. But otherwise, I would not have been able to go to school without taking out student loans, unless I were to stretch it out over like 10 years. I don't know, because I worked 2-3 jobs throughout college, and that was just like barely enough to pay for groceries. I also had Hope Scholarship, which is a scholarship specific to Georgia, where if you have good grades and you maintain that, you get a small scholarship. It wasn't much, but it did cover like a percentage of just tuition. And then I also had some grants just because when you're like lower income or whatever they look at, then you do get some grants. But on top of that, on top of the remaining tuition, there were also university fees, which were pretty costly. Like I said, I went to Georgia State, and I want to say that each semester those were at least over $1,000. It was like the buses, the gym, the sports, blah, blah, blah. I do understand that you could go to a community college and save some money with that. But yeah, I literally only applied to Georgia State University, and that's where I went. The other thing is that I majored in biology, which is a pretty good degree, and I had the goal of being a dentist. However, 3 years into college, into my bachelor's, which is pretty far in, I changed my mind. I took all of the classes that I needed to in biology to become, I was like pre-dental. I had started volunteering at a dental clinic, and that's when I changed my mind. Because I was like, I don't like this. The dental students were miserable who I was talking to, because that's who I was like working under when I was volunteering, and they basically, it was because of them and also the clientele that were coming in, like, and their teeth were just like smokers, and it was disgusting to me. So I'm like, why? I don't want to do this, you know? And then to see the dentists in residency or whatever they were, how miserable they were, I was like, I'm changing my mind. And I stayed as a biology major because I was too far in, and shifted gears. I ended up going into research, microbiology specifically, and then that's what I got my master's in. And by the time I graduated, I was like, okay, I need to get a job related to my degree to make use of this. And I think a lot of people don't end up doing that. Like she said, nobody is forcing you to get a degree. And I do think we are too young to make a decision like that, of course. But once you graduate, you're an adult. And alone, even if you don't have a parent or an adult to tell you what a loan is or what it is that you're signing, it's on there, you know? And I understand that we may not grasp that as 17, 18-year-olds, but by the time you graduate and you get that bill, like, you should know what this is. And yeah, I think it is kind of, it shows who you are as a person, like your character, when you're like, okay, this is now my responsibility. Maybe I didn't know better, but blaming whatever, it doesn't help your situation. And that's really that's why I take everything with finances into my own hands, because I control what I can control. And outside of that, you know, like, so be it. So I think this TikTok is great. And yeah, it's unfortunate how everything is right now with all of this. I'll have more to say. Some of this might be repetitive that I'm going to say, but let's go to the next one.
Why I'm not paying off my student loans as an MBA grad making $200K a year. I'll pay them off eventually, but here's why I'm not in a rush to do it. Let's say I took out a $100K loan and that I have 10 years to pay it back at a 6% interest rate. Let's also say that I have $100K sitting in my bank right now that I can use to pay back my loans, if only. The simple thing to do would be to take that $100K and pay off my loans, right? Think again. If I take my $100K to pay off the loan, I'm debt free, but I also now have $0. If I invest my $100K, I'll make $160K in 10 years from compounding returns. Over the same time period, I need to pay back $135K on my loan principal and interest. Let's do the math. 160 minus 135 equals $25,000 that I made from not paying off my student loans immediately. Vivian from Your Rich BFF posted a video the other day about how we need to change the narrative on debt, because when rich people have debt, it's called leverage, and we celebrate them. So if you have student loans, you're not in debt, you're just levered.
Yeah, so this is what I was talking about. I did leverage that forbearance and the 0% interest during the pandemic, and I saved my money instead of paying off the debt immediately. I did not invest that money. I just had it in my high yield savings account because it was a decent amount that I was making on a monthly basis. And there are absolutely people out there who believe that debt can be leveraged, and there's like the good debt versus the bad debt. And as somebody who is now completely debt free, I just prefer for it to be that way. Like, I love being debt free, and that's why I understood when I paid off that debt, when I put that $36,000 lump sum to my student loans. Even after the interest came back, my money would have gone further by investing that money. I fully understand that. And I actually had some people say that to me, like, why would you pay this off? It could be forgiven. Why would you pay this off? You're going to make more money in the market. I get that, but I didn't want to owe anybody money. Like, being debt free for me is very, very important, and I love it. so much. As y'all know, I talk about this all the time. I made a whole video on it. So is it fine for people to do this? Absolutely. Like if you're still making your payments, and I think you should try to pay it off in at least 10 years, because there's some options where it can take 25 years. And at that point, it's not going to be worth it. Like this math that she's doing, sure, you could have money invested, but you're going to pay so much more in interest on 25 years of student loans versus the 10 years. So you're better off paying it off a little bit faster. This is the same. Some people do this with financing things or with credit cards. So they could get a new credit card and have 0% interest for 18 months. And so they'll just take the 18 months to pay that off. And I think that's fine. Do what you want to do. But that's not what I do. I don't like that. I don't want any debt whatsoever, because once you start getting comfortable with things like that, something sneaks up and happens. That's just my mindset around it. And maybe that's negative, or maybe that's me being silly, but I just would prefer, I absolutely love using credit cards, but me financing a mattress or me financing anything at 0% interest is just not my style. And I would rather have that 0% utilization rate. So I think this is fine, and you can absolutely make more money in the market by doing this, but just do the math and make sure it actually works out. And it also just depends on how you prefer to have your finances set up. And I at the time it worked because my student loans were at 0% interest, and that's what I was going to do. Plus we were waiting on seeing if things were going to be forgiven, but otherwise I wouldn't have done that.
So is everyone lying about not paying their student loans back? Because why did my credit score just go down 120 some points? With student loan repayments being delayed, I kind of forgot about it until I got this notification about my credit score dropping. There's absolutely no way that all of you have allowed for your credit scores to drop this low and don't care. Like, what are we doing? Are we repaying them? What is happening?
Hopefully I don't get copyright for that music in the background. So in case I do have to mute that part of the video, she's basically asking, are y'all really not paying your student loans? Because I stopped paying and my credit score dropped by like 100 plus points. So I'm going to read the comments on this one. We are broke anyway. Credit doesn't matter if you don't have money to begin with. I had a 750, now 520. Ain't even stressing, ain't got it to give. Bought my house last year, so I honestly don't think I'll ever pay attention to my credit again. Those student loans were forgiven by Jesus Devonte Christ. Okay. I want to know why they think I can afford a $500 monthly payment. Why do they not take into account housing, food, and living costs versus your income and amounts you can afford? I agree with that. I think that there needs to be more considered with the amount that you owe. But also, what were y'all doing for the last 5 years is what I want to know. Because if you just pretended, this is the problem. This is the problem where it's like, finances are so important. I'm going to get heated. I'm going to start getting mad here, y'all. What were y'all doing for the last 5 years? Because I understand some people had hard times with the pandemic and maybe lost their job or had expenses come up that they didn't expect to. But at the same time, a huge chunk of people were in the same situations as myself or other people where like just you didn't have anything crazy happen and you kept your job. And so if you just pretended you still had to make those payments, you would have had X amount saved up and you would be in such a better place, you know? If you would have just put that money out of sight, out of mind, you probably could pay them off. And now you didn't have to make payments, right? For the last couple of years, from my understanding, like the interest came back, but a lot of people still had their payments paused because they didn't have to pay them. But that interest was accruing. And I think they should have done a better job around this, like telling people what to expect and like, hey, this means your balance is going to increase and you're not going to be making payments. It's just going to continue to increase because your interest is gaining interest, you know? And I think they should have done a better job with that. But at the same time, y'all are adults and need to understand that this is what a loan is. Just like the first woman was saying, you can't just, in what world can you borrow money and not pay back? Like, I understand that there's bankruptcy and stuff, but then it gets to a point where people are abusing the system. And that's exactly what people are trying to do. Like, this is still a loan. If you give $100,000 to somebody, wouldn't you want some interest on that? You know, like, I don't know. There's so much to this. And I get why people are saying this. Like, oh, I don't care about my credit score. I don't know if it was on this or a different TikTok, but people were saying like, oh, my score is going to drop, so it's going to affect my ability to buy a home, ... Oh, wait, as in saying, like, I can't buy a home anyway. And I get that, but right now is just right now. So you 10, 20, 30 years from now are going to look back on this and, like, if you are thinking this way right now, it can really mess you up for the future. And getting into this mindset of, like, whoa, me, I'm not paying it back, I can't afford this, my credit, I don't care about my credit. You're probably going to care about it one day.
So Donald Trump is now putting into place that he wants student loans to be paid back starting in May. And I just want to say, don't pay those student loans. Don't pay your student loans. If you're confused about what to do, honestly, just enroll back in school. Like, just re-enroll. And the longer you're enrolled in school, your payments are deferred. Just keep getting those degrees.
I'm not going to even continue. The more debt you're also going to take on, and y'all are telling me you're just going to, okay, so you have $50K of student loan debt right now, right? And then you're like, okay, I'm going to get another degree. I'm going to get my master's. I'm going to get my PhD. And then you have $200,000 of debt and you finish your schooling. And then you're like, I kind of want to move on with my life. Are you going to continue to go to school? And now you have $200K, $300K of debt for some crappy degree that you're just like, oh, I'm just going to keep going to school because I don't want to pay this. Please don't listen to this advice. This is awful. If you chose a quote unquote bad degree and you're struggling to find a job in that field, try your best to find a job in that field. Make it worth it. Find that job and work there for as long as you need to pay off the student loans. And otherwise, there's other options. Sure, you may not be using your degree. I did the same thing. I did get a job for 4 years related to my degree. I was a microbiologist for 4 years. And I paid off the student loans, I made my money. I made it worth it. And then after that, I switched to tech because I wanted to make more money, because I wanted to work remote, because I wanted different options. And then now I'm self-employed, so I'm not using my degree whatsoever. But I did make use of it for when it mattered, and I paid off my student loans. So I understand that people choose degrees, and you got to try to avoid that. Look, do your research. If I were to go back, I would not choose biology. I would choose something else, because knowing what I know now, I was like, okay, I don't want to be a biologist. I probably would have gone for like computer science or something. But just these days, like, there's no excuse, in my opinion, because people are still making these poor decisions, like they're still choosing to go back to school or choosing degrees that you're not going to find anything with it, and then taking out way more debt than you actually even need because you're taking on debt to pay for clothes or to pay for even just your housing, and it just gets worse and worse.
So the Trump administration has announced that they are going to be collecting on student loans that are in default. If you are a federal employee, they're going to garnish your wages. If you're not a federal employee, you might still get your wages garnished, but if you go to collections, your credit score is going to drop. It could be on your taxes, like you're going to owe money on your taxes. I don't know. I don't understand how y'all could forgive all these billionaires who took out PPP loans when they didn't take no loss during COVID. Forgive all those loans, but don't forgive the 18-year-old who got $50,000 with no income, no credit history, because y'all told us that we need to go to college to get a good job. We don't get no forgiveness, but the billionaires who already get all these tax cuts, they get their loans forgiven. When I first graduated,
this is another one. So she's going to keep talking, but I'll stop it there. But she, just like that first one was saying, she's like, who told y'all? Nobody's forcing you. Nobody's holding a gun to your head. Like, you must. And I understand they say, oh, go to college, get a degree, you're going to get a good job. Yes, that's something that when I was going to college, that's what I was told. That's what I was told by my parents, or like, that's kind of what it was expected. And that was the way of life. And I get that. But still, the fact is, nobody forced you to do anything. And this, just living in this mindset, is victim mentality. It's absolutely victim mentality, and not taking responsibility for it, trying to continue to blame the government. Obviously, the government isn't great here. Like, it's obviously corrupt. There's issues with it. But at the end of the day, the main person that this is affecting is you. Like, they're not going to be like, oh, you're right, let me not do that. Like, you're going to get your wages garnished. You're going to have your credit drop. You're going to have all these issues. And then this is just going to create a cycle in your whole adult life and for your children's life. And this is upsetting. don't go back to school just to avoid paying, because you're just going to end off worse. All right, next one.
So I'm just going to go ahead and tell you how to avoid getting your paycheck garnished and your tax returns garnished. The only way they know where you work is from your tax return. So that means switching your job every so often. My paychecks were getting garnished at one point, and then I switched my job and I didn't tell them that, and they didn't find me. And then when they did find me, I got another job. And then at that job, they were calling our Google Voice phone number, which was not being manned. And who was checking the mail at that job? That startup job? Oh yeah, that was me. And I didn't even see anything come in. But even if something had come in, nobody was checking the mail. So then they also garnish your tax return. So make sure you're getting the minimum amount withdrawn. And then when they find you at your new job, get a new job. I did this for like 5 years.
Again, stopping this one early because I don't like this. And she said, this is not financial advice. This isn't feasible for a lot of people to begin with. I think job hopping is a good thing every 1 to 2 years these days, especially if you're in like tech and that type of thing. But that's different. For this, probably not feasible for a lot of people. There's some people in decent jobs, and then if you're trying to do this, like, you're not willing to, and they'll find you. Like, they'll eventually find you. The thing too is that, let's say you go to file your taxes, that's through the government. That's through the government. So maybe they won't be garnishing your wages, but you could get a tax refund, and they'll take that tax refund. Like, they'll get their money eventually and somehow. And I just don't think it's something to mess with. I just don't think it's wise to do this, and you can be upset about it all that you want, but this isn't the way to go about it, y'all. Okay, so that one just loops doing that. So he's been ignoring his student loans, and his score dropped 191 points. So for this one, I want to see this comments. His caption says, anybody else get the surprise from not paying those student loans? Mine went down 200. I don't even care. They can drop it down to the floor. I don't even care anymore. The government really has no option but to forgive if 50% of us don't pay, and most people have little to nothing to garnish. 43% have made a payment since it started back up after COVID. Just logged on and my forbearance is extended till January 2027, so I'm just gonna chill. That's a future me problem. Yes, your forbearance was extended, but your interest did not pause. Your interest is still there, and you're going to end up with a much larger bill. So this is the problem, y'all. I literally wanted to cry checking my credit score. I haven't even looked. I lost my loan info years ago, and they wouldn't help me reset it, so I don't believe that. I went down from 700 something down to 400 something, and I'm absolutely furious. You're literally doing something and not expecting consequences. You know, it's like, what is the logic behind this? What are you thinking? And again, going back to like, what have y'all been doing for 5 years? What have y'all been doing? If you are not better off than you were 5 years ago, something needs to change. I fully understand that life happens. I fully understand that. But you have so much more control over things than you think. And by the way, I'm saying like you, and people watching this, I'm not specifically talking to y'all. Like, this is just me talking out loud, explaining to these folks in the comments or anybody who may be thinking this way. There is so much more that you can take control of. And that's why I don't know. I don't even know what to say. It's very, very upsetting. And I hate that people aren't taking responsibility, because life is just so much better when you do take responsibility. Honestly, stop playing victim. Stop acting like you didn't know this was money you had to pay back. And going back to what I was saying, if you have not progressed even a little bit as a person, or like in 5 years, you should be able to progress financially in some shape or form. Your education around it, your choices around it, a lot of it can be changed in 5 years, even if you're not a high income earner. But that's something you can work on actively. Okay.
Oh, and another thing, you can tell FAFSA to go on right to hell, and I'll meet them there. I'm not giving y'all a goddamn cent of my money, okay? Money that I don't have, by the way, but even if I did have the money to pay for it, you're still not getting it. Y'all the one that forced us to go in the first place, telling us that if we didn't go to college, we weren't going to amount to nothing, and, you know, going to college is better than having a trade, and, you know, if you want to have this amount of money, then you need to... All lies. All lies. Most of us are unemployed. Most of us are working in fields that have nothing to do with our degree. And you want my money. You can take
another one. She's saying they forced us. They told us to get a college. Who is they? Who exactly? Because it's your parents. It sounds like you want to blame your parents because that's probably who told you to go to school. I don't know. I don't know where this is coming from. Nobody forced anybody to do anything, and trade is so much better. You know, I think these days, instead of going to college, unless you're like absolutely set on like, I want to become a X, I want to become a Y, and you have to go down this path of college in order to do that. That's great. But otherwise, trade school, amazing. The world is changing, and I don't think college is necessary whatsoever for you to be successful or to do what you want to do. Yeah, so there's some good comments here. Nobody forced anyone. Why is there no accountability? FAFSA forced you to go to college? What? Can someone please explain how you were forced to get a loan and go to college? They're going to garnish your wages or deny tax returns. Yeah, like you're going to pay it back. Somebody asked, what if they garnish your wages or take it out from your tax returns? And this girl said, it's beyond my control at that point. I won't be a willing participant, that's for sure. But that's you participating in a worse fashion. That's you being forced to do... That's silly. Yeah, I can't even watch these all through. It makes me... You've got to take responsibility. I get that there's a problem, but it doesn't excuse all of this.
Do you think people should have to pay back their student loans?
If it's a loan, of course, then yeah, you have to pay it back.
No. No.
No, absolutely not.
No.
Yes, of course.
No.
You know, we go to school and we have to go through so much already that it should be, free for everyone.
It's a loan. They have to pay it. My son did. Everyone did. Why not now? I don't understand that.
Students already have to pay enough for school.
Not everybody has money to pay for college education or something. So in my country, the Netherlands, it's now possible to get some money from the government, a fixed amount per month. And I think that's a really great idea because then everybody can go to college.
I think the U.S. does need to take some lessons from other countries on how they handle a lot of things, that's for sure. My answer to this is if you take out a loan, should you pay it back? Yes, I think you should. I think student loans should have a cap on the interest rate. I do agree with that. I see a lot of times in the comments or even on these TikToks, like, we shouldn't be paying any interest on student loans, but I don't agree with that. I don't think it should be 0% interest because, yeah, like, just again, in what world can you borrow money for 0% aside from like intro offers with credit cards and that type of thing or different financing options? But that's different. As I keep saying, the student loan system there is a problem with it. It does need to be fixed. And I think that the interest should be capped. I think it should just be like 3% and not go beyond that. But you know that loans, it's a loan, which means it has to be paid back. And typically, when you take on debt, it has an interest rate with it. So
this is the part that pisses me off because I did not take out $80,000 in student loans, not even close to that. And so I'm over here, like, I have no issue. I have zero issue. This is a simulated situation, and so they're guesstimating what I should owe. But like, I don't have any issue with paying for all of my education. I will pay for it. I will pay for it over the next 10 to 20 years. I don't care. I will pay for it. I have an issue with paying $20,000 to $30,000 of interest or more than that. It's going to be more than that because it might take me more than 10 years to pay this off. And so, like, genuinely, no issue whatsoever. I'll pay the 60 grand. I will pay it. I don't want to pay 30 more in interest. Like, I'm not, like, why do you get $30,000 for loaning me money? What are you doing that earns that? Like, there's no work being done that earns $30,000 over 10 years. Nobody's...
For sure, it is way too much in interest that people are paying on student loan debt. And I think what's hard about it, too, is the interest on top of the interest. It just compounds on itself and just keeps on working against you. And when you're not making any sort of payments, it just gets worse. And then, you know, depending on if you have subsidized versus unsubsidized, like you just end up in this really tough situation by the time that you graduate and you're trying to get a job. Before I give my tips, I did want to read this comment. So he said, that's just the way lending money works. No one would lend money if they didn't have something in it for them. Just stay away from income-based repayment plans. So yeah, again, this is these lenders, it's a business, just like credit cards, just like everything with finance, it's a business at the end of the day. And she said, lending money makes sense. I'm specifically talking about student loans. It's still a loan, you know? And he said, loan is a loan. You got the benefit of taking $60K to pay for college when you didn't have the $60K liquid. Now they get interest. The real problem is schools charging more than the degree is worth. Yeah, I think that's a problem too, that a lot of times what schools are charging, like school is way too expensive these days. I believe for Georgia State University, when I went, the standard like 4 years costs $30K. And that's a lot. That's a lot of money. And then of course your master's costs more. My master's was actually paid for. My tuition was covered, but the fees were not paid for. And I did still take out student loans to pay for living because I was working multiple jobs and my tuition was paid for. I was a TA, so I was getting a little bit of a stipend on a monthly basis for that. And then I had a part-time job while also being in school full-time. So it was just a lot going on. But I still did have to take out extra student loans, even though my tuition was paid for, because I had to cover the fees and then pay for groceries and like living. There is just a lot with this, and I don't know that I could fit it all into this video, but my suggestions for those with student loans, this is for people who already have their student loan debt. Obviously, if you haven't started school, then that's different. Like hopefully these days people are making wiser decisions around it, but I have no clue what that's looking like. But when it comes to making payments, first of all, enroll in autopay because you'll save like 0.25% on interest, which is something, you know, at least there's something. So that's one thing a lot of people don't know about it. Enroll in autopay, you can still make extra payments, okay? And then if you are making extra payments, first of all, choose a payment plan that, let's say that you're focusing on just your student loans right now, right? Like you don't have your credit card debt or anything like that. I think those should come first. If you have high interest credit card debt or any like personal loans that are higher interest than your student loans, you should focus on paying those first. Or if you want to do the snowball, then you can do that, but then you might get things like mixed in with the student loans. But what I did when it was time to start tackling my student loan debt toward the end of my debt-free journey, I had paid off my credit cards, I had paid off my car. So I then started focusing on my student loans, and this was before the forbearance. So I switched to a payment plan to where I could get my minimum payment to as small as I possibly could. And it was like $97 or maybe $127. I can't remember exactly, but it was pretty small. And it would take me like 25 years to pay off the student loans. But because I knew I was going to be making extra payments on the debt, I was like, okay, let me get this as small as I can. And then anything extra you can pay toward the debt, put it toward the balance with the highest interest debt. You should be able to allocate that when you are making a payment through the portal. At the time, my student loans were with Navient, I think is how you say it, Navient. And then that got switched to Advantage. But through Navient, I was able to choose which debt my extra payment was going toward. And that helped tremendously. So I was able to make a payment toward the debt with the highest interest. And then each day it meant I was accruing less and less interest. Another trick is to split up your payments into two, or at the very least, make your extra payment as soon as possible. So the sooner you get debt paid down with your student loans, the less you're going to pay in interest. Like I was saying before, my student loans were accruing $5 plus of interest every day. So if I made an extra payment, I made my minimum payment when it was due, you know, and then if I made another payment the next day or, you know, a couple days later, that lowered my balance enough to save me some on interest. And so that $5 per day slowly got down to $4.80, $4.40, $4. You know, it kept dropping because I was just frequently making payments. So even if it's just like an extra $10 toward that highest interest debt, do that because that compounding interest won't be happening anymore. So yeah, those are my tips with tackling your student loan debt, and it will eventually get paid off. Kind of covered everything else, but yeah, just I know it's not a perfect system. I know that it's frustrating, but control what you can control. Take responsibility. Forgive whoever it is that you need to forgive for getting you to this point. If it's yourself, if you think it's the government, if you think it's your parents, it's too late. Like, it's already there. You have the loans in your name. You can't file bankruptcy and get rid of them. And you just take control. And then you'll be so much better off by tackling this debt a few years from now. And you'll just have your financial future ahead of you. Then you can start investing and make money off of the banks with credit card rewards or whatever it is that you want to do. You know, like, you'll eventually get there. Just take responsibility now and it'll work. All right, I'm going to stop there. So feel free to comment down below how you feel about student loans. I know that there's probably a lot of different opinions about this and, you know, differing from mine, and that's fine. Just please don't be rude in the comments. Like, these thoughts are my own. You also don't have to be rude to people who think it should be forgiven. I think everybody is right that they're entitled to their opinions, you know, but that's just my thoughts. So feel free to share below, but otherwise, thank y'all so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one.